Morning still, everyone. Just a quick insight into myself. I've been in the district for 14 years, and I have worked in all behavior programs, or mainly behavior programs. Our DBC programs, which is self-contained, and then our PASS program. I have been a trainer in the district for several years as far as how we train to help teachers manage classroom behaviors, how we give them strategies. A little more background is I have been dealing with kids and behavior for a very long time. I am a fourth degree black belt. In high school, I used to kind of teach daycare kids, and that was a very trying and learning experience for me. And so picking up from that is what got me going into dealing with behaviors and dealing with kids, and then also dealing with kids with special needs, because we have trained several kids with special needs to come in from a white belt and getting them all the way to a black belt. And then seeing that progress has been awesome. So now we come to the parent side of things. Um, this is where, as I would always say, as a teacher, it takes a village to make things successful. And by having the parent being involved and giving parents tips also helps teachers at school. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about some of those things and try to give you some insight on how and why a lot of the things of what they do and how they do it. So as we get started, today's agenda really much is broken down into two sections. The first part of it is the why, and that's just going to be the functions of the behavior, the types of behavior, patterns of behavior, and factors that influences the behavior. And with that, that kind of leads into how we're going to deal with it. The first main piece, and we're going to spend some time on this one, is communication skills. The second piece to it is how we set our limits, and then how we set expectations, which is going to be the rules and routines and the things that we want them to do and why that's important. Because the routines is what's going to help create the discipline that kids need to function. And then the last part of it is the power of choice. And where that comes in is it helps them to develop some things that we want them to have, but we start earlier and making that part of the process. They're able to reach that goal in a quicker time frame. So a quick overview. All behavior is learned, and all behavior is communication. When when a when a child misbehaves or when they do behave, they're still communicating something. And the part that we take is trying to figure out what that something is. Um, Behavior does serve a function, and the function that it serves is either to get away from something or to get something or to communicate something. The good thing is behaviors can change. They can always change. It can change for the better and it can change for the worse. What determines that is the factors and the things that impact behavior. Because there are many things that impact behavior that we may or may not think of, but it plays a part. And because it does, it causes a chain reaction to happen. So, the functions of behavior. So, when we look at the functions of behavior, what we're looking at is why the behavior is happening. And there, like I said earlier, it serves two main functions. The first function is to get something, whether that's internal or external. The second function of behavior is going to be to escape or avoid something, which can be internal and external. So, for example, let's say we have two students who are not listening, or two kids who are not listening. One of them could be listening because one of them could not be listening because they're have to do work or have to do a chore and they're trying to escape from doing that chore. You have the other one who's not listening because they're just distracted and they just can't sit still. And so, because of that, they're just moving all over the place. Even though they exhibit the same behavior, they're still coming from two separate spots, two separate locations, or two separate causes, which is that function of the behavior. And it's figuring out, is it to get something, or does he not have the ability to do it? Or does he not want to do it and he's trying to escape so he doesn't have to do it? So when we look at functions of behavior, it really boils down to three things. And we call it the ABC in education. The A is pretty much the antecedent, or you'll hear the word trigger. Like, this is anything that makes the behavior more likely to occur. What causes it to happen? And it's usually it happens right before you see the problematic behavior. The last piece of that is the consequence, which is what happened right after the behavior. Like, what was the thing that got them to either calm down or re-escalate them so the behaviors continue to happen? So, so looking at that, knowing this, when we look at the causes, that's usually the triggers. And there's a lot of different things that can trigger behavior. And when it does, we may not, sometimes we see the trigger, sometimes we don't. But sometimes they can be internal and sometimes they can be external. Um, so we'll talk about that a little bit more. Um, with the functions, when we analyze by looking at the triggers and the consequences, that helps us to determine the purpose of this behavior. That helps us to determine whether what we're doing is it something to make the situation worse, or is what we're doing working and the behavior is getting better? Knowing that helps decide the best way we can address problem behaviors and teach appropriate replacement behaviors. It also lets us know where the behaviors are being successful at, where we see change by what we have that's working. So now we go into types of behaviors. So you have several different types of behaviors. You have the attention behavior where they're doing it to get attention. The child is engaging in behaviors to gain the attention of adults and peers. Many times, it doesn't matter whether the attention is positive or negative. What they want is your attention. And so, most of the times, the best way to get attention is to do something that we respond to. And if we respond with more emotions and more we give more attention to when the kid is not doing something, then that's what they're going to do in order for us to respond to get our attention. And so we're going to discuss throughout this presentation certain ways to respond, certain ways to not be the main, to respond in a way to where how we want them to get our attention, but also teach them. Because a lot of this has to do with teaching the right way to do things. One of the things we talk about is when children struggle in math and reading, we give them a lot of resources, we give them a lot of things to help them. But when they struggle in behavior, the first start is discipline. And sometimes discipline has to come afterwards because we need to teach something because there may be a lagging skill. There may be something that they're not catching. There may be something that just may be off that they're not getting. And so we have to figure out, like I said earlier, is this an ability or is this a want or a can't do? And once we figure those two out and we focus on the ability piece and we figure out that they have the ability to do it, then from there we go to consequences and discipline. So the next type of behavior is to escape. And we see this a lot. Escape a demand, meaning they're going to use some type of behavior to escape from a non-preferred activity, whether it be work, a chore, not wanting to go lay down, not wanting to go to the restroom, not wanting to go to a certain place. They avoid that or they act out or they may throw a tantrum or they may do something to escape that. And so knowing that is how we work around that, knowing what type of behaviors we're looking at, knowing what type of behaviors we're dealing with. The next piece is automatically maintain behaviors. And this one is more like self-stimulating behaviors. These behaviors occur whether individuals or other people are around or not. And a lot of these things could be like those who likes to toe tap all the time, or those who like to just sit and they just tap on things and doing stuff. These are things that they do, it just makes them feel better. And so it's not socially maintained behaviors, but it can be controlled. It can be taught. Like we have those that may probably click pens all the time or just play with stuff and just be by themselves and just keep going. The other type of behavior is access to tangibles. It means they perform a certain behavior in order to get a preferred item or an activity so they can keep that preferred item. And so with that being said, it's just some of the things that they do. Here's where we get down into the patterns. Patterns of escalation, severe behavior outbursts typically follows a continuum or a pattern. Identifying where they fall on this continuums determines what's the best way to intervene. The earlier we intervene in the pattern, the easier it is to de-escalate the children's behavior. So I want to spend some time and just really talk about this pattern of escalation. When things are normal is when everybody's calm. Then usually something happens, a trigger that causes a minor disruption or inappropriate behavior. A lot of times that shows up in some form of anxiety. They're anxious about something or something is bothering them. So before, let me go back a little bit. Before they get to that, let's go back from normal. From normal to minor disruptions. One of the things that we talk about is, and I'm gonna talk to the moms out there. When baby is born and we bring the baby home, what happens is they go into bed, and then let's say that first night or a couple of nights in, they start crying. Well, one of our first responses is to go pick them up. So when we go pick them up, as a baby, they're starting to understand that if I cry, something is going to happen. There's a cause and effect that takes place. So then what happens is as they get a little older and we reach that point where we're like, okay, well, they're going to cry, but I'm going to try to make them stay in through the night. I'm not going to go pick them up. I'm not going to go get them. And so they're crying. And then we're deciding whether to get them or not. And and then us trying to decide to get them, what happens is they crying. It's 2 in the morning. They're steadily crying, and we're trying to decide should I not? And then we decide to wait. And then what they do is they cry longer, stronger, and harder. And so by them doing that, then we're like, oh man, I gotta go get her. I gotta go get him. I can't take it no more. And then we go get them. Now they're starting to understand that if I do this long enough, strong enough, and hard enough, somebody's gonna come pick me up. So at this point, indirectly, they're learning how to manipulate. They're learning that if I do these things, I get a certain reaction. Something's going to happen. So with that being said, as they grow a little bit more and they get a little older, then we start to crawl and walk and touch things. And we get to this point where we may look at them and say, don't touch. And then they look at us and then they slowly reach and try to touch something. And then they understand a natural consequence, which is if I touch this, something may happen, whether it be the stove, whether it be a socket, whether it be a drink, and then we have some type of consequence for that. So throughout this whole process, they're learning and developing how to push limits, how to set boundaries. And this is the best time to do it because they're small enough to where we can kind of get them to understand it a lot quicker. It takes less effort. But then as they get older, if these boundaries go unchecked, then they become a normal part of how the kids function. Meaning, if they don't have the boundaries set at the beginning, then what ends up happening is they develop more and more. So then we go to, so when we're doing something and we may say stop, they test us and they don't stop. They keep doing what they're doing. These are the minor disruptions. More minor disruptions happen, then it becomes major disruptions because now we're getting to the point where they're going to challenge what we say. They're going to be non-compliant. As they get older, it turns into verbal aggression. As they continue to get older, it sometimes becomes physical aggression because now they're at this point where they've learned that I can do this long enough and strong enough and hard enough. Then and as they get older, they get stronger or they have more words to say. So then they get this explosive behavior where you get a lot of verbal, a lot of physical. And then after a while, they get to a point where they realize, okay, I messed up. I did something wrong. And now they have to come back down. And as we call that the tension reduction area. And that's really where they're transitioning back to coming back to normal. So through this process, there's something that we say that takes place. When they're calm and normal, they're in the frontal lobe where logic, reasoning, and understanding takes place. And once we start going into minor disruptive behaviors, and when we get to peak disruptive behaviors, there's a process that takes place, and we move. The thought process changes from the frontal lobe down to towards the limbic system, which is in the back of the brain, where they're more in reaction. And I like to call it kind of like it's kind of like the caveman mode, where what they're doing is they're just reacting. They're in fight or flight. They're not thinking logically. They're not thinking reasonably. They're just reacting to whatever is happening. And so with behavior, it kind of goes into like a dance where If you do something, then I do something, and then we go back and forth. So if they're coming at us with aggression and we respond with aggression, they become more aggressive. If they come at aggression and we respond calmly, the aggression goes down and then we go down. So how we support these things or how we support their behaviors changes their next step in that process. And the best way, it kind of takes the fight out of them. It takes the fire away. It brings them back to a calming area. Now, with that being said, it's not something that's going to happen very quickly. It takes time. But one of the things that I can say is by knowing the triggers, by knowing the anxiety, what it looks like, how they show it, because it's usually an action from the anxiety. From seeing those things, then you know, okay, they're about to go up the roller coaster. Excuse me, let's bring them back down. Let's intervene early so we can get them to come back and get them to tension reduction. Because at tension reduction, what you see there is you see they may want to be left alone. They may be crying. They may feel guilty. They may be apologetic. They're coming back. They're in that transition back to getting to normal. Here's the thing. Once they get to normal, that's when we can have a discussion of what happened. That's when we can discuss and talk about the whole incident that took place. And there are certain ways that we can go about doing that that makes it effective, but it also teaches them at the same time. Because the overall goal is to teach and for them to think critically, for them to be able to make decisions based on their age level, based on their grades, based on how they grow. The sooner they're able to make decisions that's based upon their age, then what happens is as they get older, it gets easier. The more they do it, the repetition, the easier it gets, the more they learn, and they can take these things and put it to other areas in their life, whether it be their academics, whether it be if they have to do something, and then it also helps because now they're opening up this door of communication to where they feel comfortable coming and talking to you and letting you know this is what's going on, or this may be a problem, or this is what I'm struggling with, because they feel comfortable to address those things. So, factors that affect behavior. So, what I want to talk about here is what are some factors that might negatively influence the children's behavior? So, here's a few. We have waking up late, forgetting to eat. Maybe they didn't eat breakfast or something, or if they didn't eat dinner because they were asleep or whatever. Not getting enough sleep will affect behavior. If they were running late, maybe running late to school, running late to an appointment or to a practice. Family stress. There's things that go on within the family that may affect how they feel or may affect what they're going through. Or we may not think they know, but they know. They may not know the conversations, but they know something is going on because everyone is moving different. Everyone, the tension in the room is pretty thick, or they pick up on certain nonverbal cues or things that we how we walk or how we say things or the tone that we may use. The other thing that can affect them is illness. Illness as far as what's going on in the world today, as far as COVID, or them being sick, or a family member being sick, or maybe a grandparent or somebody that they're close to passes away. These things affect them. The other thing is academic struggles. As in the classroom side of it, we see a kid who struggles in math. They're not going to say, I don't know how to do math, but they will act out so they don't have to do it. But then when they come home, if they have to do that homework, you see the behaviors because they struggle in doing it and they don't want to do it. The other issue that affects behaviors is trauma, any type of trauma that they've been through, how they process these things, or do they ever process it? Are they allowed to process it? These are things that can affect behavior in a lot of ways. What I would like to do is I would like to ask you guys um, to put in the chat some of the things that you feel that may affect or influence the child's behavior. And Melissa, could you read some of those answers to me, please?
Sure thing. First one, father taking a job out of town.
Yes.
Siblings.
Oh, definitely.
Bullying at school from a classmate. Jealousy. Two families temporarily living with each other. Anxiety, unresolved conflict, divorce. Aggressive voice from father.
Wonderful.
Jealousy, feeling excluded, sickness, fear of missing out.
So we have those are a lot of things. And as we go deeper into this behavior stuff, I don't want to forget those things. I want you to keep those things in mind because they look different based on the kid. They look different based on how the child is going. But that what they perceived as that affects how they respond when we communicate with them, especially if we don't address those issues, because those issues for some kids, those issues may be something that they're struggling with and they may explode right away. For other kids, those issues, the triggers may have them shut down and they may not speak. They may stop talking. They may just stay to themselves. Other kids get in risky behaviors as they get older. So it affects them the way they show how it affects them. It all is differently, but those things do affect them, especially when they go unnoticed, especially when they go unchecked. So, and here's the thing with everything we said, with precipitating factors, all we talk about is the top part. That's the stuff that we know. What we don't know is the deeper issue, because what we don't know is how long it's been bothering or the way that it bothers them. Like how do they feel when they're going through these things, especially if things that they can't control, like they can't control divorce or an aggressive voice or the fear of missing out when these things are happening. How is it affecting them deep down and for how long? Because sometimes it just builds up and builds up and builds up, and then as parents we may say something a week or a month later, and then they just have a meltdown or have an episode or respond real harshly or aggressively, and we're like, where the world this come from? Well, why is this happening? Because there's things that they're holding on to that they either don't know how to process, they don't want to let go, or is very confused about, and because of that they have never been taught or don't know how to express or work through some of these things, but they know how to act it out once it gets to a certain point. But even in acting it out, they're communicating, I don't understand. It's just trying to figure out what it is that they don't understand. So, with that being said, we go into how we communicate because this is going to be key. So, when it comes to communication, it's broken down into three sections. You have 7% of communication is just words, the words that we say. 38%, we're going to get to how we figure that out. 38% of this is tone and volume. 55% of communication is body language. So when we look at what the kids are doing, or let me reverse this a little bit. When we look at what we're doing, our body language speaks volumes. So when things are happening and we think they may not understand or they may not know, more than likely they do because of our body language. When we communicate when they've done something wrong or they've made a mistake or they've had an episode, we tend to communicate more with our tone and volume. So if our volume is aggressive and that's the trigger that caused the behavior, they're not going to listen to the 7% of words. Because when we deal with communication, one of the things is communication is broken down into content and emotions. And if content is just the words, then that means close to 90 something percent of our communication is going to be based off of emotions. And usually, when the misbehaviors are happening, when they're at the point where they're having these meltdowns, we communicate through emotions more than we do with our words. And by doing so, then we follow up with your did you hear me or why you're not listening? Because they're too busy focused on what your body is saying, what the tone of your voice is saying, than they are with the words that you're trying to get them to understand. On the flip side of this, they're communicating more with their body and tone because they don't have the words. They don't know the words to say, I'm not feeling good, or I don't like it when this happens, or this is where my issue is. You're going to see it in their body language. That's where the acting out comes in. You're going to see it in their tone. That's where they get loud, or they may be sassy, or they may be screaming or yelling. That's where, because, and also on the kid's side, they don't have the words, but they have the body language, they have the tone. That's the easier piece. So it's helping us. And like I said, because behavior goes back and forth, if we're in control of our emotions, then they can focus more on the words, which in turn, it calms their emotion and help them learn the words to use. So that way they're able to communicate back and forth. So, and we use some of these things already. These are things that we use. We just kind of use it a little differently. So, like for example, to get the kids' attention, some parents may count down, they raise their hand, they may snap their fingers, chime, tap on something, and the kids know this is it. Some nonverbal cues that we give as warning, and I know a lot of parents have the look, that look they give where kids know, uh-oh, I better do this, or I need to stop doing what I'm doing. Or we may tap on the desk, or we may get close to them and they know, okay, this is what I have to stop doing because something's about to happen. So it's learning to give them things, but also give the kids nonverbal cues. So when they're not, because they don't have the words and they're already using their body, give them something to use. So when you get upset, I need you to put two fingers up. So that lets me know we have an issue, something is wrong. Having these conversations with them. The other thing is when we're talking to them, the calmer we stay, the easier it is for them to understand what's coming across. So, as an example, when a student is yelling, or when a kid is yelling and they're just getting loud, one of the best thing is we go back and forth and we talk. And in this conversation is going to be the first and foremost thing that we're trying to do is here. They're trying to communicate something is wrong, but they don't know how. So the words are coming, but we focus on the volume and the behaviors that go with it. So focus on that first. And how we focus on that first so we can get to the words is on the parent side, we focus on our volume. So the usually volume is matched. One volume they give, we give another. So the best way to do that is lower our volume to get to understand theirs. And usually, how that works, for example, is going to be if a student is yelling and they may be saying, so and so won't play with me, or so and so is being mean at me, but they're yelling it to you, you can always come back with, okay, hold on, I understand, but I'm trying to understand. All I'm understanding you say is so and so is. But because you're yelling, I can't get the rest of the information. So I need you to just take a breath, try it again, and speak lower. They will try, but then the body language kicks in, and then you may get the next piece of the sentence, but not the full sentence. So then you get lower again. Sometimes you have to get so low to a whisper for them to understand, oh, I'm too loud. And but by you being at a whisper puts them at a normal voice so you can understand what is being said. After we understand what is being said, then you go back and you paraphrase and you check in just on the facts of what's being stated. So you're upset because so and so won't play with you, or so and so is giving you a hard time. Get the yes. Get some type of acknowledgement to what is going on. From that point, where you go is you you focus on, okay, so we're going to take care of the problem first, because now we know that's what the issue is. So we address that. Then we come back later and address how he addressed the issue. Meaning, okay, so why weren't they playing with you? They're talking to you. You're able to work through the conversation of what's going on. Okay, so I'm gonna take care of so and so not playing with you, or you getting mad because somebody did something. So, but this is what I need from you going forward. When you get mad, instead of yelling, I need you to just tell me what happened, because you told me now, and I'm not doing anything. I'm not yelling, but I can't help you fix the problem if you're coming at me by yelling at me because I don't understand. And that takes so much time for me to understand what you're saying. And I can help you quicker if you just talk. Now we're giving them we're giving them a strategy. We're giving them something to help them along the way. So now they know, well, next time I get upset, I'm not going to yell it out. I'm going to do my best to talk. I'm not saying it's going to be 100% perfect. They're going to try, but they may end up going back to yelling. But the second, third time around, when you say the same things and you get them to bring their voice down, they're going to automatically know, oh, yeah, we did this last time and it took too long for me to get to the end. So now I know I can do it better and quicker, and I get to the end quicker to get my problem resolved. So in the midst of this, I'm working on the behavior, I'm teaching communication, and they're learning a skill that they didn't have before on how to express themselves when they're frustrated. So the other piece of effective communication, calm, firm voice is more effective than a loud or challenging voice. When you demand compliance through your volume and tone, you sometimes children are put in a position where they feel they have to save face. Hence, the behavior takes place. Here's why, and I kind of touched on this a little bit before. When we demand through our volume and tone, they're not listening to the words. They're only going by your volume and your tone. So the words to the children at this point sounds like Charlie Brown. It comes at wah 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 because they're more anxious or nervous or more focused on the volume and the tone that's being given. They catch the words. They may catch a word here, a word there. It's like a bad cell phone connection. It's choppy. They're going in and out. That's how they're processing this. And this comes down to processing because, like we talk about communication, it's sent, but it's also perceived. So if what we have to look at is what we're sending, are they perceiving it that way at 100%? Or are they perceiving it at 50% or 90% or not at all, based upon how they perceive what we're saying? So the calmer we are and firm we are, and matching the energy that they are, being less with the energy that they're given, gives you a better chance for them to understand what we want out of them, as opposed to trying to demand it out of them. Because now there's times when you have to, emergency situations where volume and tone is going to be necessary. There's a fire in the house or there's a safety concern that we have to really address it. But this here is more based upon your everyday issues, your minor issues, things that they struggle with, to get them to the point to where they know this. I have to learn how to express myself. I have to learn how to talk when I get mad, instead of yelling or instead of throwing things or instead of acting out or instead of smashing something. This is the way to do it, because a lot of the communications is, the calmer you are, the more effective you will be in getting to a resolution, and the quicker you will get to a resolution, as opposed to matching what they give you by yelling back and going back and forth. So another example in this communication piece is going to be using I statements. And why we use I statements? Because it's like a choice. But when we give choices, you have to make sure it matches your value system, what your family has in store as far as expectations, rules, and consequences. We don't give choices when danger is involved. That's an automatic. And you don't give choices unless you're willing to decide for the student in 10 seconds. Here's the thing. When we give the choice, we have to make sure it's something that we are going to be okay with either way. Don't give a choice where it's going to be something that you're just trying to take his bluff or her bluff, because they will go there, and then you end up into going the back and forth, and then another behavior takes place. Delivery of it is important. And the delivery, like I said earlier, has to do with, one, just being calm and addressing it in a calm way. The other thing in the delivery is, with come at with, I need you to sit down, or sit down here at the table, or sit on the couch. Would you rather sit at the table or sit on the couch? You think it'd probably be better for you to sit at the table or sit on the couch? Either way, I'm okay with it because now you've given them an option. And I'm talking more about choices towards the end on some of the strategies. So this is why, like I said earlier, the emotion piece is where the problem comes in. More emotions, less thoughtful action. So let's go back. Think about the last argument you had with your significant other or a family member. Do you wish you probably said something that you wasn't supposed to? Yes or no? You put in the chat. Second question. Do you did you emotionally get worse because of the argument? So it'd be a yes, yes, or no, yes. Put in the chat and let me know. Absolutely, yes, yes. No, yes and yes. Yes and yes. It's a lot of yes and yeses, a couple of no's. So here's the thing that we have to be mindful of. We tend to when emotions come through, it slips through your filter. And once the words are out there, it's hard for it to come back. Just like through a text message. When we send text message, if you send a text message to someone you're angry with, you will perceive every message they send in a negative way. Where if you take the same message with someone who you're friends with and you're not angry with, you're going to perceive that very, very differently. There is a perceived or implied perception of tone and volume in text messages, in emails. So even with students, they're learning, they're watching. And as parents, you're their first role model. You're the first person that they observe and learn from. So they're watching you with everything you do. So they want to know. And if you don't believe me, tell them to imitate you, and they will show you your mannerisms, the way you walk, the way that the words that you use, how you say things, your body language. They pick up on all of that. They're kind of you're the first teacher for them. You're the first person to teach them how things should be done, how boundaries should be set, how they should communicate. They're going to follow that to the T. So, but what they may not get is they'll get the emotion stuff, but they don't have the mind. Their brain is not at the point where they can fully understand everything. That's still their frontal lobe still being developed, where logic and reasoning comes into place. So all of that they have to learn, and in learning it, some of it's going to come from home and how we teach them to get those things. So once we do get into these type of arguments or disagreements with the kid or with our child, the first thing is not taking it personal. See where it's coming from. Even though we do take it personal because that's our kid, and they're saying something that's probably hurtful, but they're hurt too as well, which is probably why they're saying it. But you're probably not the reason why they're hurt. It could be something else. They just don't know how to express it. So because you're there, you're it, and you take the brunt of it. You become the venting board. So a good way to de-escalate this situation is to agree with the emotion, but not the behavior. Meaning, you can come with, I can see why you might feel this way, or I can see why you're mad, and that's fine. But what happened afterwards, that's where the problem is. So I can see you was upset or hurt because somebody wouldn't play with you, or your sister threw something and it hit you. I totally understand that. I would be upset too. But what's not okay is that you picked it up and threw it back at her, or that you tried to chase her down and you hit her. Say that's not okay. And so teaching them the difference between the two, because these statements help to split the emotion from the behavior. So their emotions is justified because that's how they feel and that's what they're looking for. So what's not justified is the behavior that came after the emotion. That's what we teach. So the next time you get mad and you feel hurt, I need you to come and let me know so I can take care of it. I need you to walk away and just sit over here and tell her to stop it and then let us take care of it. Like you want to be the one to intervene to teach them another behavior to justify the emotions of what they're feeling. Because the way they feel is always going to be valid because that's how they feel. It's hard to tell them not to feel that way. They're going to feel that way. But what we change is the behaviors that come afterwards to something that's more appropriate as opposed to just the response. Because now when we do that, we're going from we're going from the emotions of reacting to the emotions of thinking. We're taking that thought process back away from the reaction in the limbic system back to their frontal lobe where they can have logic and reasoning and understanding because now they know, okay, when I do this, I understand that I feel this way, but this is how I need to react instead of going to the back of my brain and I just go to fight or flight. And so that's how we teach that. That's how we get them to understand this is the better way to deal with that as opposed to the way we've been doing it. This is how I'm going to teach you not to do this. But here's the thing, it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. I look at it, the best way I can explain it is nobody learned to ride a bike in one day. It took time. It took practice. It took falling off and getting back on. It took getting somebody holding the back of the bike. It took training wheels. So they can learn to balance it a little better on their own till finally they come off and they have it. The same thing when it comes to dealing with the behaviors. It's going to take time. You're going to go through some ups and downs. But as you go through it, you'll notice small victories along that path. That journey that you're doing is more, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And in that marathon, you're going to learn how far you can go. The first day they're trying to ride and run 5 miles. First day may be a mile, and they may have a meltdown. Next day may be a mile and a half. Third day, they may go back to a quarter of a mile. But then the more you do it, it gets longer and longer and longer. They're going to have some steps back, but you'll take more steps forward to get to the point where they can do it on their own. So, with that, we get down into setting limits. So, when we set limits, you want to make sure these four things are present. You want it simple and clear. That means you want it concrete. We don't set limits and make it abstract because it means different things for different people. And so for example, I can say be respectful. Well, respectful is a very abstract term. It can mean a bunch of different things for different people. For mom, sister, brother, uncle, aunt, nephew, teacher, each of them can have a very different definition of the word respect. But if you say, for example, if you say, when we come in, we're going to talk in an inside voice, or we're going to use a normal voice, or we're going to keep our hands and feet to ourselves. We're not going to hit. That's very concrete. No hitting is very concrete. Hands and feet to myself is very concrete. Respect is very abstract because respect could be treat others nicely. It could be do unto others as you want them to do unto you. It could be I'm trying to think. There's a lot of different definitions, but I think y'all get my point. The other thing is you want it reasonable and enforceable. You want it to be something within reason, meaning it should be age appropriate based on whatever the limits are. We can't set a limit that we know that they can't do because of their age. It's got to be something that we can enforce and it's something that we do consistently. And the last one is going to be probably the hardest one because we can make it simple and clear. We can make it reasonable. We can also enforce it. But where comes into question is the consistency of what we're trying to enforce. Because kids know, they know their parents. They know us adults. What they would do is if we tell them sit down, they'll go sit down. How long they're going to sit is a very different question. It depends on how long they think they need to sit. And if they know they get in trouble the first and second time we tell them sit down, the third time, because we're worn out and we're like, okay, whatever, y'all get them next time. Then in their mind, I'm only have to sit down twice. The third one, I can get away with whatever it is I'm doing. And that could be with any behavior. And so by the consistency not being there, just like when they test boundaries as a kid, as a baby, they're going to continue to test boundaries. The only difference is it looks different now. So when they're testing boundaries now, it's going to be, are you going to hold me accountable every time? Are you going to make sure I do that every time? When is going to be the chance that I'm be able to get away with whatever it is I'm doing? And so with that, setting limits and expectations. First thing is you want to set it immediately. If you ask for compliance 12 times, expect 12 times to ask for it before they follow. Meaning, if we're constantly asking for for compliance, and they're waiting for you to enforce or do something, and you keep saying it over and over again, they're going to keep doing it until you do something. Once the something is done, then they stop. Well, the reason is because they know you're not going to do it until that number, whatever that number of times is, whatever the behaviors that you want them to stop. If you keep going back and saying stop, 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 and then you finally it's like lose it, and you either give a direct, like, you need to stop it now, or you need to go sit down, or you need to leave me alone, or this got to stop. Once you change from stop, 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 whatever that change is, that's usually when it happens, because it's like, oh, well, you said this 12 times, well, that means you're not serious. Oh, I'm just going to keep doing it. They don't understand that they're not getting the difference because of the tone and volume that you're putting on that behavior is no different than probably everyday conversations or everyday things that's going on. It's not that they notice a change in your tone and in your volume and in your delivery of the message that they understand that, okay, you're serious, I need to stop. So setting these expectations. The other thing is, mean what you say and say what you mean. Meaning, if they do something and they have to go to their room as a consequence, then that should happen every time. But if you keep saying, I'm gonna send you to your room, and you don't send them, and you steadily go back and forth saying with them, then in their mind, they're not gonna say it, but they're thinking, you're not gonna do it. You're just gonna wait. Or we're gonna continue doing this, because that becomes the pattern. And we probably have patterns that we've done where if you think back and look, it's like, you know what? I could probably change this because I've said this so many times and they've gotten away with it until something else happens. I've seen sometimes where moms will say certain stuff and then dad comes in, and when dad comes in, things change. That could be because, or the vice versa. Dad say something all the time, when moms come in, things change one time. Look at the pattern of that, and see, when mom comes in every time, she means what she says and says what she means, something happens. And so that's become the pattern. And they realize that from small, and now it's just becomes a habit. Like, it's just, oh, I know when this person comes in, this is what's going to happen. Whether it be mom or dad, whoever's the one that's the disciplinarian is the one that's usually the one that's doing something to get them to understand that, oh, this is what it's got to be, and it's going to be this way every time, no matter what I do or when I do it. The other thing is, have a plan in place for non-compliance to the rules. By putting a plan in place, they know this is what it is. And if you're having to redirect too many times in a short period of time, then the routines and the limits are not well established. And we have to go back and start setting plans, expectations, rules, and limits to get them to understand that, okay, you've been getting away with this for a while. So starting this day going forward, this is what we're going to do every time this happens. And I use the word every time because that's what's going to hold the consistency to. The other thing you could use, call it the if then rule. Define what you want the child to do and what the child will earn if that activity is completed appropriately. So here is something else that we talk about. There is something with the word don't and do. A lot of times when we say, if you're somewhere and somebody says, don't look at that stuff on the wall, people tend to look. Why? I don't know. That's just something that just happens. But what I do know is you bring attention to whatever it is you focus on. It's no different than if, we've all had this time where we're either thinking about a car and we're looking at this car, and then all of a sudden we're driving down and we start seeing this car all the time because that's where the focus is. When we tell kids to stop or don't do something, they focus on doing it more. So what we've learned is to speak on what you want them to do, not what you want them to stop doing. So if I, instead of saying, like if they're in the house and they're like, and they're running around, instead of me saying don't run, I'm gonna say walk. I need you to walk. Then they start walking because now the only thing they're focused on is the walk part, not the run. Same thing if they're um, that's usually the best one. But the same thing if they're like not wanting to do something. So I need you to sit at the table and we're going to and eat. But with the if then it comes to if you walk, then you may go and watch TV. So that's where the change happens. And then there's more to add because then you could also use another thing that we have is called a when then. Like when you walk, then you can do this. Then there's another one that says if says you can either we call this a fail safe where you say if you choose not to walk, then you're choosing to not watch TV. I'm giving them choices. And then the other piece that I didn't add is put a time limit on it. Because when you put a time limit on what they're doing, and I'm gonna go back to the first example. If you walk, then you may watch TV for 10 minutes. That ties into the behavior. If it's not behavior related, you don't have to put the time limit. But if you're trying to change a behavior, give them a time limit, meaning you can have this preferred stuff for a less amount of time. Now, the more you do this, the behavior that I want to see you do, then the more time you're going to get. But we're going to build up to that. You're going to have to show me through your actions, not by you saying, I can do it, I can do it. Because they've said it and they probably wasn't able to, and we know why, because of the triggers and things that have come into place. So by doing it this way, now we've set time for them to learn, okay, if I do it, I got 10. If I do it tomorrow, I may get 15. And you keep building and building from that until they get to the point where that behavior now becomes the new normal and you don't have to use the time limit at all or the if then rules at all. How to increase compliance? Well, there's a couple of recommendations. Precision request settings. So you have please request, you have wait times. If a child complies, we're going to reinforce that behavior. We're going to bring attention to it, especially if it's the ones who seek behaviors to get attention or to escape a demand. When they do what we want, we're going to really overly enforce that, reinforce that, reward that. If they don't reply, then you need to is the request. Give wait time. Wait time is a valuable thing because it allows processing time. So I guess another way I could put it is how many times as adults we've been upset. We don't want to be bothered. We just want to be left alone. We just need some time to ourselves. If that's anybody in on this Google Meet, go ahead and just put me, I, or something so I know that in the chat. So and here's where this comes in while the wait time. When you have that wait time, it allows you to calm down. It allows you to process. Same thing for the kiddos. By giving them wait time, if they're really upset, you can always, I use a timer for the little ones, for the small kids. As they get a little bit older, they may have a timer, but just may be a little different. But give a wait time and say, you know what? I see that you're upset right now. You need a break. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes and I'm going to come back and talk to you. Is that good? And wait for a response. They may not say anything. They may just sit there and nod their head. Great. Sit there and wait. Set the timer and walk away. Don't say anything to them. As long as they're safe and they're not trying to destroy anything or break anything or run out the room or elope, give them that time. When you come back after the timer goes off, check in. Are you, hey, you ready to talk? Yes or no, or you need a little bit more. See where they're at. Give them that time to process because once you start the conversation from there, they're in a better headspace than they would be when they're going out of into major disruptions and minor disruptive behaviors. If they don't comply after a period of time, then you can designate a negative consequence if then statement. Sometimes they may need more than 5 minutes. We sometimes need more than 5 minutes. They may need an additional five. But then after that second one, say, hey, look, I'm gonna give you another five, But then after that, we have to do something, or I need you to um, speak to me, or at least write it down. Sometimes when kids are mad, they don't have the words, so they can either write it down or draw a picture. The best thing is if they're struggling and they're withdrawn and they don't want to talk, then just ask yes, no questions. Because by doing yes, no, all they're going to do is just nod their head, yes or no, or put up a finger, one for yes, two for no. This way, they don't have to formulate a thought to just use the words. They could just respond, which is a lot quicker than for me to say this, this, this. Usually, what happens, you go through a series of yes, no's, and then the word starts to come out their mouth. Like they go from this or this to yes, that happened, no, that happened. That's your sign that they're ready to talk, that they're ready to communicate verbally, and they've gotten through the emotional roller coaster that they were on. Tell children what to do instead of what not to do. Avoid stating request in the form of a question. Will you clean up your room? That's a request. Even though it's a directive, it comes off as a question. I need you to clean up your room, get it done by this time, and then we can do something. But if we ask the question and then they say no, we have to understand that we invited that answer because of the question that we asked. Anytime we want to do a directive, you want to use a calm, firm voice, but you also want it to be specific, descriptive, meaning put a time limit, put exactly what you want, and make it concrete as possible. Don't interact verbally or non-verbally during the wait time, like I said, because then it comes across as nagging and it interrupts the thought process. So if they're thinking and the timer's not off, don't say how much time you got left. Just go look at it, because that interrupts the thought process. And then you may have to start over because they were probably thinking, okay, I'm getting better, or they're processing this, what happened, this, what happened, this, what happened, this, what happened. What time do I got left? Oh, wait a minute. Oh, shoot. They got to go back and start over. So give them that time. The other thing we're going to talk about real quick, the power of praise. Praise is something that they don't get enough. They get more attention. They don't get enough attention to. There's more attention given to the negative behaviors than it is to the good behaviors. For example, it's easy to highlight everything they've done wrong. So then my next question is, have you ever thought about and highlighted everything they've done right, even if it was something they're supposed to do anyway? Just for the simple fact that they did it, have we highlighted that? Have we shown that, I'm really proud of you for doing this, this, and this? And so, just for sitting still, or just for doing whatever if there's a certain behavior that they do, if whenever they do the opposite of it, we praise them for it. We give them more praise for it. Even small things, praise them for it. When we get praised, it kind of lifts your spirits. So when they get praised, the same thing is going to happen. They're going to feel better. They're going to want to do it again. They're going to do it more. Some of it may be a language that they understand. So the power of praise is very, very beneficial, and research has shown you can improve behavior by 80% just by pointing out what they're doing correctly. If you have two or three kids and they're around the same age, and one of them is not doing what they're supposed to, you can easily go to the one who is and praise them in front of the other one, and they'll look and they'll stop because they want that same praise. You can, even if you gave them a glass of water or a snack or something, the other one stops because he sees it and he's like, oh, it's no different than the old phrase. Like if you're walking down the street and you see people running, you kind of look like, uh-oh, and then you start running a little bit because you're like, you want to make sure you're not the one caught behind. It's the acceptance piece. Like, I'll be a part of this, but I see that this is what's happening, so I need to be a part of it too. And that changes behaviors. And then you can use that as a way, and this is really for like minor behaviors, little things. When they get to the point where they're at a 10 and they're at their peak performance, that's not going to work because they're not going to care. But this is prevention to keep them from getting to the 10. So this is when they're at a 2 or 3 or 4, you can jump right in and bring them back down to a 3, 2, or a 1. So now we go to expectations. Now, with expectations, we're going to talk about the rules that's set. One thing I'm going to say is your rules are non-negotiable, clear and specific. This is where the consistency piece comes in. You don't have a relationship with the rules. The rules are the way they are. If students are struggling or kids are struggling, one of the things you can do is post your expectations in the house. Post the rules in the house. Why? Because if they see it, you don't have to say it all the time. Once they see it, it's like, oh, that's what it is. This is what's going to happen. You can always go back to looking at it to where, okay, so if they broke a rule, let's say the rule is everyone sits at the table to eat dinner at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock, and they're not following the rules. And then the consequences are if you're not at the table, this is what happens. So when they're not at the table, one, you don't have to say, the rules. You can just point to that rules and say, okay, read that. Did you do that? Yes or no? Okay, so you know what the consequence is. Done. It's established. You reinforced it. Now they have to follow. The rules doesn't, the enforcing the, and then that also takes the enforcement of the rules away from the relationship that you have with your kid, because the rules are separate from the relationship. Now, and why so is because once you've said it and they see it, that has nothing to do with you. It's already been established. You're just the person who's going to enforce it, which may cause a problem, but they're not going to blame you for that, because we're going to talk about it's the decision they made of what not to do. And you work through that, but they still have that consequence. So, a couple of things with the rules. You want them, limit them to 5 or less. We're not trying to put a novel together. Simple, easy for them to understand. Make it something that's observable and something that you can measure over time. Making it something that's reasonable. It's kind of like with setting limits. And you want to make it consistent so they can learn something from it and set an expectation. So when we go to consequences, consequences are what happens as a result of the behavior. Consequences can be positive or negative. And consequences is going to be based off of a decision that they've made. They should be reasonable and logical and clearly connected to the behavior or the choice of what they've made. So, for example, you could say, if you're sitting down, if you come here and you sit down and let's say, do your homework, you have a choice. The negative consequence of that is you're not going to get the work done. You may get a failing grade, or you may be grounded, or whatever that is. The positive consequence is you're able to get a good grade. You may get a reward. These things happen. By teaching them consequences on both sides, one, they don't automatically assume all consequences are negative. The other thing is now we're working on decision making and how they can make a choice when it comes to that. Consistency is going to be the key. Keep it clearly posted so that way they know this is what it is, or keep bringing it up, keep discussing it. Discuss, and when we deal with consequences, positive consequence, we want a lot of energy. That's when you want your body language, your tone and volume to be at an all-time high. Negative consequences, you want to drop it low, and it's just a matter of fact, because they're going to react to the higher the frequency of whatever it is. So positive and negative consequences occur after all behaviors. You have natural consequences, which is what happens naturally. You have applied consequences, which means it's manipulated or controlled by someone else, and they're just applying things. So you look at what's the goal. So here's some different types of consequences. Effective, positive and negative. It's predetermined and communicated. It's directly taught to the students. It's geared more towards more positive than negative, but it's got to be meaningful, and you implement it consistently and privately. Meaning, when we're working with them, if they do something great, you know what? You can always say when they're in that part, when they're in the mindset of what should I do, and the behavior is happening, let them know what their options are. Their options are, if you do this, this is a positive consequence. If you do this, this is a negative consequence. Either way, you're going to have a consequence. What determines which one you have You do based on what you choose. So what do you choose? So here's some applied consequences, and I'm gonna get to choice as well. When we deal with applied consequence, that means I'm applying something for positive reinforcement to increase the behavior, getting something good as a result of doing something good, good behavior. I decrease the behavior, or I'm applying something as a result of bad behavior or a punishment. If I remove something for negative reinforcement, meaning I'm taking it away because of a bad behavior that you're doing, then the other thing is I could be removing something good as a result of behavior. So these are just different types. Planned consequences are great when you want immediate change of behavior. You want to restore order or change behavior without making the situation a major issue. Here is the thing with planned consequences. If you know that this is going to be a behavior, or you're about to go somewhere and the behavior may happen, let them know ahead of time. Front load them. Take the anxiety of way of having to figure out what it is. Letting them know that if you do this, you have a positive. If you do something, a negative behavior, this is going to be the negative consequence. If you have a positive behavior, this is going to be the positive consequence. And check in what choice you're going to pick, because this is what it comes down to. And you plan it ahead of time. So now we get into the power of choice. This is going to be monumental for kids, because what this does is it teaches them how to think critically. Why use choice? Well, for challenging behaviors, we're looking at the pattern of the behavior. What is the child trying to communicate to us? And does he or she want something, or is he or she trying to avoid something? Which is what we talked about earlier. Make your best guess about the purpose, and then we're going to address it. So what behavior supports can help address the behavior? Well, we know what the triggers are. Is there something we can do to prevent it? And is there a skill that we can teach to help them learn from it? Because these questions is how we come up with our choices. So what we given choices, first part of it is going to be empathy, giving them creating a clear picture that we're concerned, meaning we're focused on the feeling. We're justifying the feeling that they have. The concern and the problem is going to be the behavior they exhibit because of the feeling. The other part of the concern is going to be your concern is teaching that behavior. The child's concern is going to be understanding that behavior. And how what we're going to do is brainstorm a solution together. Let's see how we can solve that. Don't give the advice of fixing it for them, because then you become the fixer who will always come to you to fix it for them, and they never learn to problem solve and fix it for themselves. What choices allows is allows them to create a situation where they're forced to think. You just set the parameters of what they have to think about. Choices gives them an opportunity to learn from their mistakes, because now they know that, oh, if I do this, this happens. So it's kind of like when you've ever had to been forced to make a decision as opposed to make a decision for yourself. When you make the decision for yourself, you feel more attached to it. You have more buy-in. You're quicker to follow through with it because it felt like it came from you. That's the same things we're teaching the kids to do. It also helps you from being getting into a power struggle or back and forth battle with the kids. Choices allow the kids to learn that we trust their thinking abilities because we're guiding them to think. It builds that relationship between the adult and the kids. It builds self-confidence in them that they can do it, that they have the ability to do it, that you trust their ability in making these decisions. All we do is guide them through the process. So by guiding them through the process, it helps them it helps them solve their own problems. It teaches them they can be responsible. It teaches them how to make good decisions, what good decisions look like. They tend to have a little bit more dignity about themselves, a little more self-respect, and they can choose the answer based upon the situations. Consequences becomes the bad guy. Parents are viewed as helpers and not judged, and it improves the relationship between child and parent. That's what we want for them to do when they get older. That's the overall goal, is for when our kids grow up to be adults, they're able to think on their own and solve their own problems and make good decisions. When do we start teaching that? The best time to teach it is when they're in your house, because the problems outside of your house are going to be major problems they have to deal with. The problems inside your house, although it looks major, it's you still have they're still within your boundary lines of your household. So you set up the parameters of what that looks like. And that's the best way to teach them, because even if it is bad, they can learn from it and it's not life threatening. They can learn to make decisions and walk them through the decisions, talk them through decisions, give them choices, staying calm, make mistakes, and let them see the mistakes. Why? Because kids view us parents as perfectionists, like we can't do anything wrong. We're not, but we know we make mistakes. Own them, because it teaches the kids to own them. If I forgot to do something, oh, I forgot to turn off the lights. Yeah, I forgot to turn off the lights. But guess what? When they forget to turn off the lights, I can look and say, oh, wait a minute. When I forgot, what did I do? Did I tell you I forgot? Yes. And because I forgot, did I react this way, or did I take responsibility for it and go and turn it off or apologize? Kids don't know. Sometimes they don't know how to fix the problem. So they stay stuck in the problem. By helping them problem solve, we're teaching them that you can work through this and it's going to be okay. Sometimes they also need to learn how to apologize, how to fix it. Like when things are wrong, okay, I know I got to make it right, but what do I do? Teaching them what to do from them watching us do it, and them learning it, because we're parents are the first teachers of kids. They learn how to fix things when things go wrong. And it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when, because it's going to happen. And so by helping them through that, it's what's going to be what's best for them, so they know this is how we work through it. This is how I do it. This is what I do when things go wrong. We're the guiding person to make that happen. So in closing, what I want to say is, before we get to questions and answers, prevention, prevention, prevention is going to be key. The earlier we're able to intercede and catch it when they're showing little signs of anxiety, the better it's going to be. The second piece to it is developing a plan and being consistent. Some of us, if we was to walk in and there wasn't a plan on how our day would go, it would it would mess us all over. If we didn't have a calendar to go by, same thing with with kids, as far as plan out their day. Plan out, get them into the habit of building that discipline of, we know that everything don't follow and plan, but let them start developing how to plan out their day, because some of the anxiety comes from not knowing what to do, not knowing, when I get home, I don't know I know I'm supposed to do this, I'm supposed to do that, but then that's it. How well I'm supposed to do it, there's not a plan, or there's nothing stating that it has to be done to this magnitude. Meaning, for example, if I had a student where I told him he wanted to go play, and he said, came to me, he said, well, if I told him to finish his work, he says, finish your work, you can go play. Well, this is a behavior class. I should have known better. But he came to me and I looked at his paper. He finished his work. He showed it to me, and it was all A's on his paper. Like he just circled A. And I looked, and my aide looked at me and said, well, you told him to finish his work. It's done. And sure enough, I was like, yeah, he's done. I got to let him go. So I said, all right, he can go play, but I'm getting him tomorrow. So the next day he came in, and same thing, because it worked for him. He tried to do the same thing, and he was like, can I go outside? I said, you have to get your work done, but first I need it to be at 70% or more, and it has to be neat in order for you to go outside. He looked at me, he kind of shrugged his shoulders. He sat down and he did his work, and he got 100. It took him about 5 minutes more than it did the last time. But then it came that then I realized my directions wasn't clear enough. I told him to finish his work, but I didn't tell him how he needed to finish it and what it needed to look like. So by giving him that parameters, it helped me realize that's what he needs, That's how I need to communicate to him in order for him to be successful. So going forward, everything we did, not just for him, but for some of the other kids as well, we gave concrete, specific parameters to take the guesswork out. Because if I leave the guesswork in, they're going to guess it to their advantage, what's best for them. So the other thing is remain calm and don't take it personally. They don't know the words. They don't have the words. We just said communication is 98% emotion. That's what they're going to go with first. So it's working through that emotion and teaching them how to find the words so that way they can communicate to you the correct way or the way that's best for both of you. Use a team because it's going to take both sides, the student and the parents, both parents and the student. Sometimes it takes the teachers, the parents, it's a village. The more insight, the better it's going to be. And proactive strategies are much easier than being reactive because then you're behind the eight ball. But if you can get it ahead of it, then you don't get to see the worst of it. That's all I have. We're going to open it up for some questions and answers. I hope that the information I gave you is beneficial and some things that you can use um, when dealing with your kids. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Maxwell. This has been wonderful. Parents, if you have questions, if you'll just hit the raise your hand button down at the bottom of the screen, that way we don't have people talking over each other. And we already have our first question. Miss Magdalena, can you unmute and ask your question, please?
Okay. Hi. So I have a daughter who is just turned 7, and the big issue that I have is that she feels like she should test every person that she meets in every situation, which is really challenging. So that, like, I don't know how to help her have make better decisions with other people. Like, for instance, she could make pretty good decisions with me.
Mm-hmm.
She is now in Mr. Pugh's class, and she can make good decisions with him and with the aide that's in there.
Mm-hmm.
But anytime somebody new comes in the classroom, he says, or sometimes anytime, um, like at her daycare, she has a new person in her classroom, and so she's got to test everybody. So I guess my question is, how do I help her, encourage her to make good decisions?
So I guess the first thing I'm going to ask is when why is she testing them? What is she looking to gain? Do we know that part
Mm.
yet? Because I think that may be something where it could be she's either feeling threatened or she just wants to make a new friend and don't know how, or she's trying to set limits to try to see how far they'll let her get away or not get away with something.
Mm-hmm.
So what we could do, what an option would be, start prepping her or front loading, like when new people come in, teach her certain things to do, teach a
Okay.
certain way to introduce herself or to respond to certain new people. And then that way she can practice and role play that out with her. Like if she goes somewhere and somebody's new, and it could be whether it be a family member or talk to the teacher and say, hey, I want to try something and see how this works. I want you to bring a couple of new teachers in and see and teach her how to speak to them or how to respond to them or how to initiate that conversation and see what happens. But the other piece, the underlying piece, is trying to figure out what what behavior pattern is she doing? Like what is she looking for with new people? Why is it new people versus everybody else?
Mm-hmm. I know that Mr. Pugh has said that sometimes it seems like she's doing it in response to, um, like somebody new comes into class. Let me see if I can do this behavior. Will Mr. Pugh or Mia respond in the same way?
Hmm.
Um, because there's somebody different in the class. So it does seem to be attention, like to
Hmm.
try to get attention. A lot of her behaviors have to do with getting attention,
Getting
it
attention.
seems.
Yeah.
So give her the attention when she does it the right way. So set her up and then give her a lot of attention. And then when she doesn't do it, give her very minimal attention as possible. In the sense
Mm-hmm.
of we're not going to address it with high energy, but with low energy and how we respond. But it's just going to be a matter of fact.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank
Hope that
you.
helps.
That was
You're
really
welcome.
helpful.
Parents, before you go, I'm going to share my screen with you. I wanted to share with you a resource that we have here in Alvin ISD that you may or may not be aware of. If you go to the, can you see it now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. So if you go to the Alvin ISD website and you click on departments and you go down to guidance and counseling, this pops up. And the With Kids in Mind is a monthly newsletter that our guidance counselors put out. We send it out in an email, but if you don't get the email or it gets lost in everything that we get in our email boxes, this is a resource for you that you might find very beneficial. So if you click on the With Kids in Mind, every month there's different articles that are in here. This month is National Mental and Health Awareness Month, so there's information on that. There's tips for insightful parenting. And down here is something that I wanted to make sure that all of our parents know about. And these are resources that we have for you here in the community. If you click on either this first box here, this is just general resources all over. Let me see if it'll pop up for me here. Resources regarding COVID, crisis hotlines, community resources, self-care tips. Parents, we need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. So some things in there. And then if you feel like you need just some more support and some more information, this down here are psychiatric and behavioral counseling resources that we have for you. I know Gulf Coast Counseling is a huge partner. They have done wonderful things for our community and for Brazoria County specifically. But this is also a resource that is out there for you. So again, if you go to the Alvin ISD website, departments, guidance and counseling, and With Kids in Mind, that's something that can be very beneficial for you. And I highly encourage you to check that website out. Do we have any more questions for Mr. Maxwell? Oh, I see someone asked Mr. Maxwell if you still teach martial arts anywhere.
Yes, I do. It's in Missouri City. I would trying to see. I don't know the address off the top of my head, so I'll give you my email address and then just send it to me in an email, and I can get the address and get it to you.
And parents also as well, if at any time you have any questions, Mr. Maxwell is available. He'll drop his email in there for you. The Office of Family and Community Engagement, my name is Melissa Igo, and Ana Pasarela, our Director of Family and Community Engagement. We're also here to help serve and support you. And we want you to know that we're here for you should you need anything. And if we don't have the answer, we'll work to get you the answer. Another question that popped up, Mr. Maxwell, what do you do when kids don't like either choice given?
That's when you go to the fail-safe and the consequences. And that's why the consistency of the consequences. So I'm going to give you choice A and choice B. If you don't choose either one, then I'm going to have to decide for you. And this is what I'm going to decide, this option right here. And I'm going to decide this every time you choose not to. So you can either go with one of these or you can go with the one that I'm giving. But I'm going to give you 5 minutes or 2 minutes to decide. And then this is what's going to happen.
Okay. Miss Norma has a question. Miss Norma, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Hi, yes, thank you. I wanted to ask, so mine is complete opposite of what the other lady asked. So mine is my 6-year-old is only rebellious with me, no one else. And she's a girl.
Uh-huh.
So how, I've actually reached out to the PCP to see if it's maybe a bigger behavioral thing.
Mm-hmm.
But my husband pointed out that it's only me. So I don't know if it's attached to anything else or just myself.
Oh.
And what do I do to figure out what I need to do?
Uh-oh, did we lose Mr. Maxwell?
Maybe, I think he froze.
That's a great question, though. Hopefully he can come back. If not, I'll make sure that we get back to you on that one. I know that I experienced that with my children. They behave everywhere else, at school, at church, or, you know, outings and things like that. But at home, they save that. That's like, I guess, their safe space to let it all out. It does appear that we lost Mr. Maxwell. And I'm so sorry for that. But Norma, if you will make sure to email Mr. Maxwell,
Okay.
we can make sure that you get the information you need. And if you don't, please reach out to me.
Okay.
We have recorded this. We will do a little bit of editing and make sure that we have it good for the website, and it will be posted so that you can share this. We will email out the recording to all the families that signed up for the workshop, because we do know that some parents were unable to attend due to changes in work schedules. Oh, Mr. Maxwell is back. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, for some reason it said lost connection. Okay. I don't want to make you think I was not on your question. No. So my question is, who does she see as the disciplinarian? Or who is the disciplinarian?
I am.
Okay, that might be why. Because with you, it's always associated as probably some type of consequence. And just a hunch or an idea. Change your approach in when you're dealing with the consequence, and see if her approach changes when she's dealing with you. It might be seeing you as the main person or have your husband start taking more of the disciplinarian role as well, and see if her behavior changes with him with that happen.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
All right.
Okay.
I think that might be everyone. Okay. Once again, parents, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time and effort. I know I learned some things today that I'm going to try and implement at home as well. Again, Mr. Maxwell has dropped his name in the chat. You will receive an email from the Office of Family Engagement from myself or Ms. Pasarela, and we will get this recording posted as soon as we can get that. It may not be until after your Thanksgiving break, but we will get that up as quickly as we can. Thank you for your participation today, and thank you for your trust and your partnership in educating your little one. We know how precious they are to you, and we're so thankful that you have chosen Alvin ISD as the place to raise your children and to have them in our schools. So everyone
Thank
have
you.
a safe afternoon,
Have a
and
great
we'll
weekend.
see you again. Thank you, Mr.
All right, you're
Maxwell.
welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.